The good things with startups is you can be late because time management is not like in big companies. You know, you go at Google at 4 p.m. if you want, but of course you leave at 4 a.m. It's a totally different life. And if you're successful with startups, you can buy a Tesla, right? Concluding on the two elements of my predecessor. On my blog, I have a blog about startups. I am measuring the Tesla index at EPFL because in Silicon Valley, 30 years ago, you were measuring the Porsche index on campus. When people were doing startups, they were buying a Porsche when it was. So at EPFL, there are 8, which is interesting. So there were some successful people. Well, professors have good salaries too, so that's another story. So I will not tell you about how to do a startup, but more why startups are important. And I want to begin with 2 short videos of, you saw the beginning of the first one. I will go on with the next one. And then I will share many different things about startups. On startups at EPFL, I'll try to be just on time. We'll see. The first 2 slides are 3 on 2 minutes. They will be the longest one. So let's try.
So 25 years old. Don't worry. Any mistake is an income, is a wonderful revenue for you. So I tell myself and told my young people, before 20 years old, be a good student. When you do entrepreneur, just to learn some experience. Before 30 years old, follow somebody. Go to a small company. Not only in a big company, it is good to learn processing. You are a part of a big machine. But when you go to a small company, you learn the passion, you learn the dreams. You learn how to do a lot of things at one time. So before 30 years old, it's not which company you go, it's which boss you follow. It's very important.
That's good.
The boss teach you different. From 30 to 40 years old, you have to think very clearly when you're working for yourself. If you really want to be an entrepreneur. When you're 40 to 50 years old, you have to do all the things that you are good at. Don't try to jump into the new area. It's too late. You may be successful, but the rate of dying is too big. So 40 to 50, think about how to focus on things that you are good at. But when you are 50 to 60 years old, work for the young people. Because young people can do better than you. So rely on them, invest on them, making sure they're good.
I am 54.
When you're 60 years old, spend time for yourself. On the beach, sunshine. It's too late for you to change, probably. My advice to the young people, 25 years old, make enough mistakes. Don't worry. You fall, you stand up. You fall, you stand up. Enjoy it. When you're 25 years old, enjoy the show.
I discovered that 4 weeks ago. It's amazing. I totally agree. And it's nice about inspiration, about having mentors, right? It's not me, it's him. Did you know him, Jack Ma? Who knows him? Founder of Alibaba, right? Okay, great message. And what I'm trying to do is to transfer. You know, when I was your age, I was doing my PhD. I was lucky to go to Silicon Valley. I saw many of my classmates doing startups. They failed. But the rate of success was quite high, and I loved it. But I was not an entrepreneur. I never became an entrepreneur. I never worked in a startup, but I became an investor. I was a venture capitalist, the bad guys who are killing the entrepreneurs. I think I'm a nice guy, and then I moved and I came to EPFL to try to help people who want to do startups, because if you want to do a startup, do it. If you're afraid of doing one, think about it, right? If you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't be pushed by people against your will. And then if you want to join a startup, it's different. It's like joining an SME. It's very similar, except it's totally chaotic in a startup. It's not established. So you need to know about these things. So, why are you looking at your watch? Oh, no, I was afraid you would be. Is he so slow? No, tell me. The point is, we interact, right? Okay. So why startups are important? And then I will try to say, is this for you, by showing you some of the tools we have at EPFL. And of course, you have my name, it's Hervé Lebret, I'm managing the InnoGrants. If you're more curious, you send me an email, we'll meet. Because when you have an idea on a project, it takes an hour. So it's not after 25 minutes, you know. But people have strange views about startups, particularly in Europe, because in the US it's understood, and apparently in China too, when I'm looking at Jack Ma. But when you're thinking startups in Europe, it's very strange. I wrote a book about startups called What We May Learn from Silicon Valley. And then maybe, Fatih Derder is a local politician. He said the next Google will be Swiss with 10 conditions. And I was thinking, wow, interesting. He has the recipe. And then, because I didn't really agree with him, I wrote a second book, which is 20 pages. If you want the PDF, I send you the PDF, send me an email, which is about this culture. Because when he's talking about the 10 conditions, it's talents, venture capital, simplify the life of entrepreneurs, provide resources for basic research, bring universities and business together, PSA and EPFL, develop centers of excellence, national digital strategy, commit the state and the army to the ecosystem, like, DARPA is providing a lot of money for research, enhance data protection, value the Swiss success stories. And I was looking at this and I said, okay, let's put everything together. It will not work. So these are not 10 conditions. These are more 10 framework situations when, if you do it, it may happen. But I can't. In France, there's everything. I am French. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because of the culture. Also, the French are, what did Macron say? Recalcitrant Gaulois, which is quite good. You will see in my next slide. You need to be recalcitrant to be an entrepreneur. But this is not the point. The point of entrepreneurship, my 10 conditions, which are in my second book, is collaborate with your competitors, PSA and Tesla, trust people, disrespect authority, very important. Macron. Do not lie to yourself, believe in your instincts, be courageous, be courageous. He said it, Commissar, be tenacious, right, or whatever. Be a role model, Jack Ma, bet on talent and youth, do not fear failure, but don't celebrate failure, that's something else. Bet on passion. He said it, Jack Ma, right? You're young, you have an intuition, you love something, follow it. Don't listen to your professors. So, first example, disrespect authority, be even contrarian. This is a book about Google, amazing book. I read books, it's on my blog all the time. You cannot understand Google, Marissa Mayer, who was an early employee and became the CEO of Yahoo, unless you know that both Larry and Sergey were Montessori kids. You learn by claiming that you'll be able to know what is important for yourself. Many parents will disagree with that statement. But the two Google founders were Montessori kids. It's interesting, right? To ask their own questions, to do their own thing, to disrespect authority, to do something because it makes sense. Because it makes sense. Not because some authority figure told you. In Montessori school, you go to paint because you have something to express, or you just want to do it that afternoon. Not because the teacher said so. This is really baked into Larry and Sergey approach. This is really baked into how Larry and Sergey approach. They're always asking, why should it be like that? It's the way their brains were programmed early on. If you look at Elon Musk, if you look at Steve Jobs, all these entrepreneurs, they are the same. They say, why isn't it this way? They say no. The Japanese culture, you don't say no, right? The German culture, you don't say no. The French culture, you say no, but you hate money, so it doesn't work, right? So they go on the street, they don't build startups. But in fact, they have some of the ingredients, which is important. Don't misunderstand me. It's not sufficient. It's a combination of things but it's not a recipe. It's a culture. Second one. Arnaud Bertrand was a Lausanne student, not at EPFL, at École Hôtelière, and he did a startup called R-Strip. He has raised 60 million euros. He has failed. But his startup has been bought by a TripAdvisor, so not so bad. Often, when I was faced with bad news, I'd simply bury them in a deep corner of my mind and choose to focus on more positive thoughts. Worse still, I would not share them with others in the team, thinking that they were my burden to carry, and that my role as a leader was to give a positive impression about the direction of the business. This, of course, meant that too often bad news was acted upon, not surprising if I didn't face it, and I didn't ensure that those who were part of the solution knew about the problems. Personally, that was my biggest fight, but all first-time entrepreneurs are different. The only certainty is that you'll fight yourself in some way. This is important. There's no one way to be an entrepreneur. You can do it slowly, fast, you can go with venture capital, without, you can do it in Europe, you can do it in the US. There are so many recipes. But that's important. And he's saying something else, which is something sometimes people forget. The key for this to work for first-time entrepreneurs is to hire the right people in the first place, the rare talent that you were talking about at Peugeot. And I cannot understate the importance of having an extremely rigorous interview process from day one. I just read a book about how Google is hiring people. It's amazing. They try to hire the best people. Of course, they pay high salaries. So if you're a small startup, it's difficult. But you shouldn't hire your friends. You should hire people who will help you succeed. And you never know what success means. Do you know these two people? Steve Jobs. Do you know that one? Maybe Paul, you know him, but it's difficult. Who knows him? That's Steve Jobs with a mustache. And he has, without a mustache, with a beard, but he's in his 70s, and this is a picture from Steve Jobs is very young. It's about role model and mentoring. This guy was Bob Noyce, the founder of Intel. And Steve Jobs was mentored by Bob Noyce. Can you imagine the luck he had to have a kind of second father as Bob Noyce? Because Bob Noyce loved Steve Jobs, and he loved him. The wife of Bob Noyce was not happy to see Steve Jobs in the house nearly every night. He was asking for advice. And what is amazing is Dan Valentine, who is a very famous venture capitalist, said, you know, there were only two true visionaries in the history of Silicon Valley, Jobs and Noyce. Their vision was to build great companies. Steve was 20, undegreed, some people said unwashed, and he looked like Ho Chi Minh. But he was a bright person then, and he was a brighter man now. Phenomenal achievement done by somebody in his 20s. Bob, one of these people who could maintain perspective because he was inordinately bright. Totally different, MIT PhD, very structured. Not be that way. He was very, very passionate, highly competitive. But two totally different personalities could do the same output. So don't tell me an entrepreneur is this way. You can be structured, very highly educated, very all the ingredients, or the opposite, and it may work or it may fail. And by the way, Steve Jobs, who has seen his speech at Stanford University in 2005, 30 minutes, the best speech in my life. Each time I listen to him, I cry, honestly, I cry. I have this tear, but let me read this. You've got to find something you love. Passion. Remembering that I'll be dead soon, and he was not dead at the time, is the most important tool I've encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You're already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. Your time is limited. So don't waste it living with someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. So if you want to do a startup, do it. If you don't want to do a startup, don't do it. But don't have the argument, I don't know how to do it. It's bullshit. You will learn by doing. Anything in life, you will learn at some point. So just do what you want to do. Of course, it's more complex than that, right? You need to have a salary, you need to eat. Of course, I know the constraints of life. And this is something for me too. Even at 54, I'm still thinking maybe I'm not doing the right thing. So I'm finished with the first part, which is really the inspiration on all these elements. And I will dig more into maybe some skills and some elements about EPFL. But I sent to the 4 organizers, including Paul, a very long presentation, 40 slides. That was the initial one, but there are other quotes which are interesting. Hopefully the videos will work. I am not sure. They should work, but apparently it was not so simple. And there's a third video about an amazing movie called Something Ventured. If you are interested about Silicon Valley and startups, watch that movie. Amazing. There are many books about startups. There's a famous venture capitalist called John Doerr. He funded Amazon, I think, and others, and on Google. And he has written a book, Measure What Matters, The Simple Ideas That Drive 10x Growth. And it's a very good book. It was published this year. And Randy Commissar, the guy I love so much, I met him twice in my life. He's an amazing individual. Has a book called Straight Talk for Startups, 100 Rules for Beating the Odds. So if you're interested, these are 2 good books. They are not recipes. They are more ideas about what is important. what is the most important element? What is the most important? Oh, no. So this is the EPFL ecosystem. I was about to ask you what is the most important element to do a startup, and I would have loved to have the answer. It's money. That it's not true, but money is important. If you don't have any money, you cannot do anything. There's a lot of tools, mechanisms to find money for your startup project if you're interested. The grants I'm managing here, there's something called Enable at the Technology Transfer Office, there's something called Bridge, there's the Lebret Foundation, you have all the business plan competition, all the business angels. If you have a good idea, there's money around. Of course, many people will tell you no, but if you have a good idea, someone will tell you yes. And if everyone is telling you no, either it's a bad idea, or it's such a good idea that it's crazy, like Tesla. So nobody wanted to fund Tesla. Elon Musk put his own money. He was lucky enough. He was rich. He had made 2 startups before. He had done PayPal before Tesla. So he put his own money because nobody wanted to put money in Tesla. Still, it was not a bad idea, right? So if you cannot find money, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but statistically, it's probably a bad idea. But it's not only money. It's not only money. It's advice, mentoring, training, schools. It's exposure. You need to talk about your ideas. If you're don't want to talk about it, it will never work, right? You need to talk about your ideas. And it's housing. And again, at EPFL, you have all these elements. We have the Startup Champions Conference to talk about these things. We have LaForge, which is a free place. We have the Innovation Park. We have trips to China and the US if you want to understand ecosystems. There's a lot of support. Again, don't want to talk about it now because it would be too long. But it's a good place to do startups in Indonesia. It's not as good as Silicon Valley. This is the only place where startups have been systematically developed in the world. But outside of Silicon Valley, and maybe outside of Boston and Tel Aviv, everything is the same. And Lausanne is small, but there's a lot of support. That's good. And the output is we have about, on average, 15 startups per year at EPFL. Not too bad, right? All the fields of technology, from information technology, biotech, medtech, micro and nano sensors, all the fields. Everything is technical, of course, at EPFL. So what I've been running at EPFL on the grants. What are the grants? It's a 100,000 Swiss francs grant for someone who wants to do a startup or a startup. And since 2005, when it was launched, I had about 800 contacts. I will not say applications, but contacts. We gave 120 grants, which is 11 million, 78 companies were created, and these companies have raised an additional 320 million in equity. What is interesting, you can see from which faculty they are coming. So STI is the biggest number and the biggest receiver of grants because it's a place where naturally you do startups. It's about hardware technology, but same thing in computer science. SV is a little smaller for strange reason. The beauty of the grants is we also accept external applications. So 25% of the applications are in fact external people to EPFL. But we're a little paranoid, so we only gave 8 grants to external people. But we want to be very flexible. And an interesting element I had never noticed is there's something very similar between InnoGrant and immigrant. And remember, immigrants do startups. Elon Musk is from South Africa. Jeffrey Young was from China or Taiwan when he did Yahoo. And Sergey Brin was from Russia or Ukraine, I'm less sure now. And when you look at the pictures of people who got an grant, some of your students, Paul, right? And on others, you can have a look. They are from all over the world. The bad thing, I see a few women here, but it's the same proportion as here, 5, 10, 15% women in the grants, in entrepreneurship, in science. We need to work on that. And these are the logos of all the companies who got an grant. You may recognize some of them. And it's a nice project. But I will not claim the grant is the most important element. It's one tool among others. It's what I'm running, so I'm really proud of doing it. But if it's not an grant, you can go to Bridge, you can go to others. But remember, the idea is if you're passionate about something, you need to understand if your passion makes sense from a commercial standpoint, because if there's no market, stop. But there was no market for Google. Nobody wanted to fund Google because they had no business model. They didn't know how to make money. So for 2 years, nobody wanted to fund them. And finally, they got money, and look at Google today. You may not be aware, but Google is 100,000 people. It's 80 billion of sales. It's 20 billion of profit. A company which celebrated its 20th anniversary 2 days ago. That's something, right? So I take a slide from a company called Art, which was done in Stergiopoulos' lab 20 years ago, I think, 1998. And the former CEO said, well, if you want to do a startup, I have 3 pictures, and I love it. Dream about this, becoming rich, buying a Tesla or a yacht. Be prepared for this, because the adventure will never be quiet. And in the end, it's mostly this, right? So that's what a startup is about. I love his slide, and he's allowing me to use it. But more seriously, this is an EPFL spin-off. I don't know if you know it. It's called NextSync, software company from Boy Falting's lab. A master student, not even a PhD, Pedro Bados, he was an Erasmus student from Saragossa. He came to me in 2004. I was at the TTU at the time, and he said, I have a patent. I did my master's thesis. I did something good. There's good result. We decided to patent it, and I want to sell my patent to IBM because IBM will love my idea. And I laughed. I laughed. He was shocked. I said, are you kidding me? Correct me if I'm wrong. Big companies don't buy patents. Patents is just an idea, a good idea, a good protection, but he went to IBM. He came back, he said, oh, you were right. And I told him that, do you want to do a startup? He had not that in mind. So I sent him to a guy at Sun. Sun, do you remember Sun? Sun doesn't exist anymore. Sun Microsystems, bought by Oracle. And he discussed with the guy, because it was about artificial intelligence and computer networks. And then we did a little advertising in the local news letter at the time. It doesn't exist anymore. We provided him with some coaching at EPFL so that he could discuss with a coach to help him structure his idea. He decided to do a startup, so he did it in September 2004. So basically a year after the idea was really grooming. He got a loan from FIT, which is a foundation, which is another mechanism still existing today. He won the IMD Businessman competition. He got further funding from City, now InnoSwiss. Finally, he had some contacts with VCs, but they were not interesting, including my former team when I was in venture capital. He got some first pilots with customers. They are local companies who were nice enough to try to work with him. Finally, in April 2006, he got 1.6 million with a local venture capital called VI Partners, which is based at the Innovation Park. September 2003, April 2006. It takes time, right? So the reason why I have this flat arrow is you need to be aware that for 2 years, you will struggle. 1 year if you're lucky, 3 years if you're unlucky. For 3 years, you may have to buy cheap pasta at Migros and to survive on basic food if you're passionate about it. And then if you're lucky, you raise some money. He has today 300 employees. He has raised 65 million in funding, and it's a company which is based in Malais, in local, in downtown Lausanne. And this is the same picture of Pedro, but 15 years later. It's an amazing story. He had no clue about entrepreneurship, but he had that personality Randy Commissar is talking about. Very comfortable with uncertainty. Very comfortable with the idea that he didn't know, but he will learn by doing. I am finished. I thought I had another slide, but I am finished. That's the idea of what I wanted to tell you. There's no recipe. There are a number of messages. Now, if you have questions, you're more than welcome.